Karen, your book titled What Do I Want to Be When They Grow Up really hit a nerve with me. When did you first feel like, I'm sorry, is it what do I want to be when they grow up or when I grow
Yeah,
up?
they. Yep,
It
yep.
is they. Okay.
It is they. Yes.
I thought I saw it I somewhere, so I was just like, wait a minute, what? Okay, it is. That was sorry, I'll start over. 3, 2, 1. Karen, your book titled What Do I Want to Be When They Grow Up hits a nerve. When did you first feel like you lost track of who you were, and what has the path back to yourself looked like?
Honestly, I think I started losing my sense of self and identity from day one of motherhood. And I'm 16 years in, and it has taken many years, one, to identify that that was even happening, and then to be able to have sort of the mental resources to examine myself, learn about myself, and find my way back. For me, finding something outside of motherhood was the key. That was the sort of, I'm a writer, so I always speak in analogies, but the clouds broke over my head and the sunlight started coming through again when I started writing and using my brain and having intellectual stimulation. I was a teacher and I worked until the day before my first child was born, so the transition to stay-at-home mom life was very abrupt. And so yeah, sort of clawing my way back to that sense of self. Who, Karen Johnson, who's a writer, who's a professional, who has activated her brain cells, those types of things, and all of those little pieces along the way of finding my way back into having, and to have giving myself the permission that it's okay to have something outside of motherhood. I think there's a lot of guilt there for a lot of women. So those are all the pieces that came together. But eventually, I'm still getting there, but I'm pretty much there.
Tell me about the abrupt switch from working. You worked full time, you were a
Mm-hmm.
teacher, and
Mm-hmm.
those are hard hours. You're very structured as far as your time goes. There's not much
Mm-hmm.
flexibility as far as working goes. So you worked and then you became a stay-at-home mom right away. There was no time in between. So what was that transition like for you, and why was staying home the answer? What was the
Yeah.
discussion like in your household?
It was sort of an interesting path. I did not expect to be a stay at home mom. The whole time I was pregnant, I intended on being a working mom. We were in a transition period, my husband and I, because we were moving to a new state. So we knew that I'd be starting over as a teacher in a new state where I wasn't certified, and I would have to go through that process. But that was always the plan. I had full intentions of being a working mom. We had a plan. We were going to, have a nanny or, daycare or whatever it was. I don't really know what it was specifically. I think it was a variety of factors, but I talk about this in my book. One day we were standing in our little apartment kitchen. I was holding the baby, and he said to me, "You're not going back to work, are you?" And I just kind of knew. And I think it was a variety of things. One, he started traveling for work right away and was just working crazy hours. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to bring my baby to daycare at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was a high school English teacher, so I used to leave for work at 6:45. It was so overwhelming. And I had poured everything that I knew, all of myself, into teaching. And now I'm a mom, and I just didn't know how to divide myself without feeling so overwhelmed. And I just said to myself, I think we're going to pick one, and we're going to do one thing really to the best of our ability right now. And this doesn't have to be forever, but we're not going to divide. And I know a lot of women do it, and they're fantastic. Some of my best friends, my closest teacher friend, has continued on. She's been a working mom her kid's whole life. She's done great. But to me, I was like, I can't do all of this. And so I never got certified. We were moving to Kansas at the time. I never got a job there. And as soon as we got there, I was a stay-at-home mom, and that was it.
So often I hear stories of friends or friends of friends that when they have first baby or their second baby and they make the switch of staying home. And they'll say something along the lines of like, well, my job would just pay for daycare anyway, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not worth it. And I always take a step back from that. And because I'm a working mom, I worked up until I had the kids every time. And then I went back to work right after. And then even when my twins were born, I started my own business while on technically maternity leave, and then made this transition to not only being a mom of four, but then being a business owner as well. So, I've never had the thought or the flexibility or the ability to really, okay, I'm going to stay home for a while now with the kids. But so often when you look at the financial aspect, it's like, well, and it's a very short term financial aspect. Well, my job would just pay for daycare, or like
Mm-hmm.
when it's all said and done, I wouldn't be making that much more money anyway. But I always think to myself, there is an opportunity cost to that, right? To staying home if you have that mentality of, well, I just be paying for daycare anyway. Because like you said, you're prior to your first child entering the world, you poured everything into teaching, and
Mm-hmm.
that was your identity. So it was, you had a birth of your child, which is wonderful and beautiful and all of those things. But then you kind of had a death of
Yeah.
your previous self, right? The teacher,
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Johnson, the English
Yeah.
teacher, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, did you have to kind of acknowledge it like it was a death almost, or did that hit you many, many years later?
It hit me years later. I did struggle from day one, but I didn't know why. I 100% expected to be so fulfilled and so um, enamored with every piece of motherhood that in my mind, that was the only way that was going to go. I had wanted to be a mom my whole life. I think I know women who don't quite have that. I mean, I knew from the time I was 5 years old, playing with my babies and then babysitting growing up. I was like, this is 100% my calling. So even though walking away from teaching, I think, was sort of a death of that piece of me, I expected to love the new Karen so much that it was going to completely fill that void. And it didn't. And then I felt horribly guilty. And I was really depressed because I was like, I don't love every moment of this, but I don't know why. And it took years of self reflection to figure out it was because I didn't acknowledge saying goodbye to teaching. I just sort of let it go. And to your point, I like that we were saying how so many women say, well, I would just be paying for daycare. For me, that was partly true. I mean, teachers, as we know, don't really bring in a lot of income compared to other professions, but it was my livelihood. I loved it so much. I never went into teaching for the money. I didn't become a writer for the money, obviously. But so it was absolutely, I did have to grieve saying goodbye to that, but I didn't until much later because I didn't even realize that I was going to have to go through that process. So yeah, it was, like I said, probably a decade in, and things started clicking. And that's when I started realizing I never really let myself cope with that transition the way I should have.
And I think social media helps by that. And obviously, you have your Instagram and your Facebook pages, which are huge, and you have a great following, and you're so honest in your posting. But I think for a while, we posted on social media, or when we talked to people about motherhood, it was like, yes, it's so wonderful. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so great. And it's so great to be with my baby, and they're an angel, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we all know that's not true. Like
I know.
we're parts of it are great, but then parts of it really suck.
Uh
And
huh.
like, it's almost as if we felt bad saying that parts of it suck, but like there's parts of our job that suck. There's parts of
Yes.
everything that suck. But it's
Right.
almost like that mom guilt of, we can't say that parts of it suck because now this is my life, or
Mm-hmm.
this is who I am, or this is what I'm choosing to fill my day up with. So it all
Mm-hmm.
has to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like it's a reflection on me. Or what do
Mm-hmm.
you think that is?
I think that's generationally instilled in us. We do. I think society does that to women. I think we do it to each other. We do expect ourselves to be so in love with and fulfilled with motherhood. That messaging is still sent to girls today. Um, And in a way that it isn't set, I don't think, to boys about fatherhood or to people about their careers. Or I think you're right. Everyone's allowed to kind of vent and be like, this isn't always great and it's frustrating. And but then when a mom is like, this isn't always great and everything, it's I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. He's decided he's unhappy being in his crate.
I can't hear him at
Um,
all, so no
okay,
worries.
okay. But I am trying to empower women and change that conversation, and because I think it really impacts our mental health in such a negative way that we're not allowed to say. I mean, nobody, when that whole expression of, enjoy every minute, it's impossible to enjoy every minute. Nobody enjoys when your baby has a blowout diaper, or your potty training toddler pees their pants in Target. I mean, like, there's just moments that where you've slept 2 hours and you have to function the whole next day. So yes, I think it is important just to really try to change that conversation, that you can have motherhood completely be your identity. You walk away from your career. It's sort of like all you're doing, but you have 100% the right, and you should give yourself permission to tell the truth of how hard it is.
The sawing is going really hard right now. So that's why I'm muting, and that's okay.
Okay.
Um, and I think it sets us up for failure when someone says, well, enjoy every moment of it. And it's like, okay, like I have to do this now, but I don't. And then the second you don't, you feel like a failure at everything because you're not enjoying every second of it. But so you're modeling something very powerful in your community, in that it's messy, and it's not always perfect, and there are struggles. So what role has that vulnerability played in your personal growth? Has it helped you feel more empowered emotionally?
Yes, but it has been very hard for me. I talk quite a bit in the book about how I am a perfectionist. I didn't know this about myself. One of the things I really want women to do is to really learn about themselves. I regret that I didn't learn more about myself years ago. And it wasn't until I was well into motherhood and I was struggling so severely that I realized a few things about myself. One of which is that my perfectionism really controls my brain and my well being to such an extent. And motherhood and perfectionism, I mean, that is oil and water. There is, I was chatting with a woman the other day, and she was saying she felt the same when she went into motherhood, having always been a perfectionist and a straight A student. It was like, this is just another thing I'm going to do well. I'm going to get an A. If I work hard enough and study hard enough, the way you have always approached life. Um, when that started clicking for me and I finally saw it for what it was like sort of cracking open something within myself. It's still something I work on every day. I still feel it. I mean, now I have teenagers. I mean, nothing humbles you like raising teenagers. So in ways that I was humbled when they were younger and felt like a failure, it's just new stuff. But I think I have better tools now when I feel it, sort of that those negative thoughts creep into my mind, to have a conversation with myself and really look back and think about, you're doing a good job, you're a good mom, your children are loved, they're supported. But yeah, I always tell my readers and my audience on social media, wherever it is, when I'm telling you all these things and trying to give you advice or talk to you, I'm also talking to myself. I'm 100% a work in progress. I do not have all this figured out. So when I'm having a bad day about body positivity or feeling like a failure in motherhood, whatever it is, and I put something out there, I'm not an expert who figured it out. I'm just saying, let's all kind of sit together on the couch and get through this together.
One thing that I've taught myself or said to myself, because I also am a perfectionist, so I do expect everything to be, perfect. If I'm putting it out there, I want it to be perfect, right? And I've learned, I say to myself, good, perfect is the enemy of good, and nothing's ever going to be perfect. But yeah, I'm the same way. So right, if you work hard enough, your result, you'll be, it'll be a perfect result. You study hard enough, you'll get good grades. All of that. I was in every club, everything. I do the same thing to my kids. Like, I get them super involved, all the sports, all the activities, all of that stuff. And I started noticing a correlation or a lack thereof. That when weeks that I had really great work weeks, like I, completed a lot of projects, I brought on a bunch of clients, like everything was killer work wise, my house was a disaster.
Yes.
It was a mess. Laundry was piled up. There was no food. We're scraping together whatever we can in the pantry and the fridge. There's nothing in there. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other way, when, the fridge was stocked and, I'm at the school a couple times a week helping out with volunteering and I'm doing this and that and at every activity for my kids, work then suffered. So it's like, you can't be good at everything at the same time.
Yes.
And sometimes you have to accept, like, yeah, family, we're going to have really creative dinners this week
Mm-hmm.
because I got a lot going on. And unless you want to go food shopping or unless you want to make dinner, you want to look at, we're going to have to just deal with it. Like,
Yep.
or, the other way around of, hey, work is going to be slow for the next couple of weeks because I have XYZ going on. And that might mean could be a financial impact. Who knows? Like, but kind of giving yourself, like you said, the permission before, giving yourself the permission of, I'm going to focus on this thing this week or in these few days. And that means something else is going to be
Yeah.
neglected or it's not going to be up to snuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we all kind of just have to deal with it, right?
Yes.
Because, also, you've turned your focus, your writing, your social media. I mean, that's a job for you now, right? So now that you have this job, but it's resulted as a fact of not having one, being, a
Mm-hmm.
job outside of the
Mm-hmm.
household. So how has that impacted you of now, like, no, I have this book to write. I have these reels to do. I have these comments to answer. I have to come up with something to post about now. And also, how's that also affected you financially now that you've taken your job as a stay-at-home mom and now
Mm-hmm.
made it into a job for the public?
Yes. One of the things that I have, I wrote this post a couple years ago, and it was sort of this epiphany moment. Exactly what you're saying. I had had this incredibly efficient day where I had cleaned the house and I cooked this really healthy meal with, I remember I had green vegetables and my kids ate it. And I was like, yes, they ate a green vegetable. And I worked out and I drank a ton of water and the house was clean and all these things. And it was in the summer. My kids were younger. And at the end of the day, I realized I didn't spend any time with them. The only way I got all that done is that they were on screens all day. And the guilt started creeping in. And I was like, wait, wait a minute. How am I possibly going to feel badly about myself right now? I accomplished so much. My kids ate a green vegetable and a healthy meal. But that is, I think, again, what we're conditioned to just absorb guilt and accept guilt into our minds because I think it's how women and girls are programmed to be. And so I decided that day that I was going to work really hard. And it happened again just this last weekend. We did yard work all weekend, which means I was outside all weekend. So the inside of the house was trashed and my kids were outside helping me with yard work all week and we mulched our whole yard. Um, but again, I think when I come in at the end of the day and I look at what I've accomplished, I'm like, I have to focus on the positive list, not the negative list. And so you have two lists in your mind. Oh, I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done. But look at all you did get done. And even if all you got done was I spent a bunch of time with my kids today and we had fun and we made memories and then all my chores and other stuff, that's a beautifully successful, wonderful day. And we have to focus on that list in our mind. Um, Financially, yes, it's definitely important, I think, for women, especially when, I talk about in the book, like I, as a stay-at-home mom, have certainly saved my family a ton of money and provided so many services that if I were to ever needed to be replaced, my husband would have to hire a huge team of people. So when I started doing something for myself and started a writing career, I needed a new computer. Just little things. It was important for my husband, and he was supportive to be able to say, like, it's time for me to invest in me. And sometimes, you have to spend money to make money a little bit. But again, I think that as women and mothers, especially if you've been a stay at home mom for so long, you feel guilty. Like, I'm used to not bringing in money and I'm used to not really spending money on myself. And I really had to sit down and be like, nope, I'm doing this and that's okay. We had a budget and we had a plan, but I think it's really important for women to feel empowered that, as they take this next step, especially if their children are grown or getting ready to leave the nest and they think, well, what am I going to do? You might have to spend some money on yourself and invest in yourself. And you 100% should without feeling guilty.
I wrote a blog post quite a few years ago, and I should really resurface it, about what essentially the salary a stay-at-home mom earns, with all the things that
Mm-hmm.
a stay-at-home mom does, and quantify it, and it's easily into the six figures, right? In what so it's like, and also if you think about life insurance, oftentimes life insurance is positioned as, will you replace the income of the person,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's such a mistake, especially with households where one parent stays home, to just ensure the salary earning partner. Because guess what? If the stay at home partner isn't in the picture anymore, God forbid,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that salary earning partner is going to have to pay for that person did. And it's going to cost a lot of money. And when you sit down and you quantify that and you talk about that with couples, it really is mind blowing. And you
Mm-hmm.
see the light bulbs go off, and you kind of see the light bulbs go off for one person, and the kind of like the, wow, like
Yeah.
the back, the shoulders going back, and like the pride from the other, because it's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
look at all these things I do. And although a paycheck isn't brought in, there's monetary value being provided and either saved or earned in a different way. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very important, because many women secretly do feel ashamed for relying on a partner financially, even when it's a joint decision, or like you said, like, I'm going to have to spend money on myself. Like, it is what it is. I'm going to have to buy a computer. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that. Or like, even like, I want smaller, like I want to go out with my friends and I want a new outfit. Like, is that addressed in your community? Like, how do I buy things for myself or do things for myself without feeling guilty about it?
Um, yeah, I think I see the range. I see a lot of women, stay-at-home moms who have no problem with it, and they're like, I go shopping whenever I want. And then there's the other extreme. I feel like partners have to find whatever works for them. Obviously, I don't think it's ever healthy if a woman or a mother is told, well, you can't because you can't spend money on yourself in any way because you don't bring in any income. But you know, I think so much of what we do is unpaid labor, and that's important to remember. If yes, I mean, my husband and I had this conversation about life insurance, and I talk about this in my book. He said to me, we talked about his life insurance policy, and he said, "Well, what about you?" And I was like, I laughed, and I was like, why would I have life insurance? And he said, "Do you know who I would have to hire if something happened to you?" And I was like, "You're right." It was astonishing to think about because he works so many hours a week and he travels. I mean, I run the ship. This whole doesn't work without, I mean, it doesn't work without him financially. It doesn't work without me doing the millions of tiny little things. So I think it's really important for moms, all moms, stay-at-home mom, working moms, but all of us to really realize that our worth isn't always necessarily tied to, like, if you bring in a paycheck into the home, your worth is tied to all the contributions you make in so many pieces of your life. And I think it's a big piece of just getting through that guilt. Um, we talk about with Mother's Day coming up. Oh, I saw a post the other day on social media where a woman said, I really just want my husband to take the kids out for the day and for me to be stay home alone. It doesn't even possibly cost any money. Maybe it does, but she said, I feel bad. I feel guilty asking for that. And I responded, no, ask for it. That is the dream. Oh, quality to yourself. So if it's, I do want a new outfit. I want to get my nails done. I want to get my hair done. I want to buy this for myself. I want to take a class at the local university and use my brain. Um, Sit down and talk to your partner, or if you have your own financial situation. But I think the first step is just say to ourselves, I deserve this. I'm worth this, and not to feel guilty.
Since this is a money podcast, we have to bring up the elephant in the room, the money in the room. And um what issue do you see, or struggles do you see women in your community having when it comes to understanding the finances of their household? I mean, no, there's no secret that women do most of the purchasing, whether they're
Mhm.
stay-at-home moms or they work and they're the bread earner, the earners of their, sorry, whether they work and they're the breadwinners of their family. Most women do the day-to-day purchasing
Mhm.
regardless. So, and I think women feel like in general that they're involved in their family finances because they do the purchasing or they do the bill paying.
Mhm.
But then when it comes to the big stuff, the retirement, the investments, the loans, all of that, many women are not involved in that part of it. And they say,
Mhm.
well, my husband handles all of that.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that? And what do you see, or what advice would you give to someone that just says, well, my husband handles all of that?
I think we need to all empower each other to be educated about all of it. If any of us, if something happened tragically to us or to our partner, and they only know certain pieces and we only know certain pieces, the fallout of that, especially if it's a potential like tragic event, like somebody unexpectedly passes away, you're already coping with, and you have children. I mean, just they think about the astronomical weight that you're suddenly carrying, and then it's also, I don't know how to pay the bills, or I don't know how, what's in our retirement, or how to access our life insurance policy, whatever that is. It's so imperative that everybody involved knows all the pieces. There's actually even like books and folders you can buy where they help you with that. Like you can buy like a binder, and it literally page by page says, this is where you write down this, so that it's all in one place, so you can grab it in case of emergency. There's also stories of women. I mean, I don't know if your readers or listeners follow Jen Hatmaker, but she was very open about when Jen Hatmaker got divorced unexpectedly in 2020. She talked about how she knew nothing about the finances and had to learn very quickly, and she regrets that. She was sort of allowed herself to be kept in the dark, really didn't want to deal with it, really didn't want to have a say in any of it. And so she's done a lot of work to empower women to know about your finances, because you just don't know what tomorrow holds. So many, I mean, my husband and I have a saying, like, we like to joke about our future, but like, we can never actually really plan for 5 years ahead, because you have no idea where life is going to take you 5 years from now or tomorrow. So, for your own future well being, not knowing what's going to happen, it's important that we are all educated about all of it.
It's like the saying, when man plans, God laughs. Like, you can try to plan as much as you can, but
Yeah.
you really, we don't know what's in
Yeah.
store
Yeah.
for us. And I wonder if it goes back to, because there are so many women that are not involved in the finance discussion, and it comes back to that perfectionism. Well, I don't know it. I was never taught it. I don't know enough about it. I can't have an educated conversation. My husband seems like he knows, which a lot of times they may just be faking it anyway, right? But he seems like he knows everything. So I'm going to let him handle it, because I'm not going to be perfect at it anyway. So I'd rather not just like deal with it if I'm not going to be perfect at it. And also it may, we grew up with, it's not ladylike to talk about money. It's a taboo
Mm-hmm.
subject. So don't even involve yourself in it.
Yeah.
And that's definitely changing. I mean, between financial literacy classes and in school and all of that, and people, obviously with social media, people are just more vulnerable. I think, they're the initially with social media and all, is like perfection, like, look at how great my house is, and look how beautiful my children are, and my life is so perfect, and da 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 da. And now it's turning more messy, and
Yes.
that's real, right?
Yes.
And there still are some of the perfect out there, and that's fine, but people are more drawn to the realness of it all. And I think we're embracing that imperfection, because that's
Mm-hmm.
life, right?
100%. And money is messy. So, like, you have to be able to, if you're going to embrace the messes and other pieces of your life, and you sit down and you learn your finances, it can be messy and stressful. But you have to make peace with that. And then now you're empowered because you at least know all the pieces.
Yes. And women, I think, are conditioned to be financially selfless. Like we're just in general, selfless in general, put everyone before ourselves and, everyone handle everyone's needs first. But also I think financially we're conditioned to be that way. Like with the comment before of you had to buy the computer or you had to do these things. Like we're just taught that, it's just, that's just our nature, I think, in general. But that could be to the point of neglect. So what do you think it would look like for women, whether they work or stay at home mom, but in general, in their 40s, right? Because your book, you're speaking to women in their 40s to be financially selfish in a healthy, unapologetic way.
Um, I mean, that could look like so many different things. First of all, I think we have, if we're going to use that word, we have to own it because that word selfish is very heavy for a lot of people. Being selfish in any way once you become a mom is just a mark on you. Like, moms are not selfish. Like, I talk in the book about martyrdom and how I think generationally women are always taught to not only martyr themselves, financially, be completely selfless, but drive themselves into the ground with all of their energy and all of their work and just give of every possible way they could give. So when you start to flip that script and tell women today that you should not be a martyr, which I completely agree with, you should, take time for yourself, take care of yourself, but also spend money on yourself, invest in yourself, those types of things. And if you want it, if that feels selfish to you, so be it. And I think that, we should remember that a lot of us have partners who, I mean, my husband isn't a big hobby guy. He's so busy. He coaches my son's baseball team and he works a lot. But he has a wood shop. He loves to woodworking as a hobby and he has very expensive tools. And that's just where he goes to de-stress. I have friends whose husbands golf and are, they just, it's a little bit more of a accepted financial investment because, well, they work so hard. We also work really hard, even if we don't bring money into the household via paycheck. And so if your husband is in a golfing league, what league are you in? Or what is your thing that you're doing? Whether you bring in a paycheck or not, again, your unpaid labor means that your household continues to work. So you 100% deserve to go join a golfing league. If that's what you do. I have no interest in golfing, but I certainly do a lot of things for myself. Book club, wine nights with girlfriends, all sorts of things that I need for my well-being. And whether they cost money or not, it's really important that mom takes care of herself. And sometimes it means she has to spend some money.
I've yet to find a hobby that's not golf that takes you out an hour before the event's supposed to start. And then the event's like 5 hours. And then you need then an hour after the event to kind of talk about I've yet to find a hobby that it works for moms in that way. I'm going to though, but whether it's us just going on the golf course ourselves, but
yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, there was a conversation recently that I read about that I thought was really important. If you're going to do something for you and you truly need a break from your kids, make sure you're actually getting a break from your kids. One woman talked about gardening and how it was really conducive to motherhood because her kids could still help her. And if that makes you happy, great. But if you're still doing the work of mothering while you're doing your hobby, you're not taking time for yourself. And again, the way that your husband might literally leave the home and get a break, which is great and he deserves. But so I think it's important that women, again, find that selfishness and be able to really say, no, I'm really going to go away, even if I'm going to sit in a bookshop for 5 hours.
Well, it's kind of like what you mentioned your perfect day before. What is your perfect day? So what would that look like if it is gardening with your kids? And that might give you an idea of what to do to fill up your cup, right? That phrase is said a lot and maybe it's overused, maybe it isn't, but I think it is a good phrase to use of what fills you up because you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to be able to fill yourself up to give the best to everyone else around you. But what is your perfect day? If it is going, you mentioned, I had a great day. I went to the gym. I did this, I did that. I worked out. If that's part of it, then build that in. And you don't have to be gone for 7 hours in order to fill up that cup. It could
Mm-hmm.
just be that hour class that you really enjoy, and then you have a good conversation with
Yep.
someone afterwards, and then you go home, and that's it. That could be all you need. So I think also there's no pressure to find a day-long activity where it's like,
Right.
today is my day and I'm doing whatever I want. It could be your 45 minutes, and that could be all you need. So I think it is important to kind of experiment of, was that what I needed? Is that what I wanted? Did that work for me? And probably also as you go through different phases of your life, those things will also be different, that fill you up and give you that sense of purpose, or outside of your family. Because it's like, sometimes I just need to have a conversation with someone that doesn't live in my house. That's good enough for me. That's all I need. So I think that's really important to find out what fills you up, and what does that day look like for you. And you're right, it doesn't have to involve spending money. And so that guilt part of it doesn't even have to be a factor, because it could cost nothing to do. And you, as I mentioned, your book is for those 40 something moms. What do I want to be when they grow up, and other thoughts for a 40 something mom. And I'm going to be a 40 something mom very soon. I turned 40 this year, and it's weird how 40 is, it does kind of mess with your mind. I mean, you're middle aged, which when I thought of middle age, I did not think it was 40. I thought like
No,
50, 60 was like middle age,
I
but it's like,
know.
no, we're in it right now.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you see as like that mentality shift for women that are in their 40s? Because I spoke with someone else that like, she's like, something happened just like when I turned 40, but like no one says, well, when I turned 39 or when I turned
Mm-hmm.
41 this happened, but something about 40.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think happens to us at this point in time of our lives?
For a lot of us, I think we start like just realizing we have to just stop giving a crap about every single thing. We have been working hard for a long time. um I think for me, there's been an element of just making peace with certain things. I look older. Okay, my body has been changing. That isn't always easy for me, but I will go out and have such a good time with my girlfriends, and we're all like, meh, our bodies are changing. We've all been gaining a little bit of weight. We're all wrinkly, whatever. And then we just laugh and we have a ball. And I remember when I was younger, I would see women in their 40s and they would be out laughing and they just looked a little bit freer, which is so funny because you think you'd be freer when you're 25, but you're still like, oh, I have to, everything should be perfect, or is my makeup and my hair, whatever. I mean, there are times now when it's like, okay, let's go out. Maybe we're showered, maybe our hair and makeup is done, or we're just gonna have a good time. And I think there's a lot of that I'm noticing. I personally have taken on the quest of fighting diet and beauty industry messaging. I don't want to be constantly pressured to look younger. I really look 45, I think, and but I am 45. I don't want to spend money on not looking 45. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong if that's someone else's livelihood and that makes them happy, but I get resentful when the messaging is constantly coming at me that I should have skin tightening serums in my daily routine when I don't. And so I think that is what I'm noticing the most, is just a little bit of, we're all growing into more of a sense of, okay, this is where we are. And we're just kind of here to have fun and enjoy life and enjoy these last few years with our kids, soak it up, and make peace with the rest of it.
I think that's I agree. In our 20s, we're setting the foundation. We're starting our careers, potentially getting married, starting a family. Like, you could end up doing a lot in your 20s, and then some people have that pressure of, well, I'm 30 and I haven't done these things. So in 30 is to do some of those like set your foundation as an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
40, there's not a lot of milestones to hit, right?
Yeah.
40 is like kind of in between, and 40s where I think you then look back and go, okay, this is what I've done for myself. Some good, some, questionable. I've made some mistakes. I've had some wins, right?
Yep.
And like, okay, how do I not repeat those mistakes. So it's kind of like the evaluation decade, if you will. So it's like, yeah, okay, good job, or acceptance, and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then it sets you for your 50s and 60s. Then when kind of more other milestones happen, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
your children move out, they start their own families, if you have children, or you retire. So then it's like, but like 40s kind of just like maintaining status quo or pivoting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which could also be really scary.
Yeah.
So I think that, so what advice do you have for women that are me, I'm approaching my 40s. I am not loving this idea at all.
Yeah.
If someone were to say, Shari, how old are you? Are 34? Like 34, I feel like I'm frozen in time. That's when my twins are born. Life kind of changed really crazy when those two humans entered the world. And so I still feel like I'm there. But I still think 34, like that feels really good for me. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
stay there for a while. But what advice do you have for women that, if they're embracing it, awesome. But maybe if they're not yet embracing it, what do you have to say to them?
Well, similarly to that message of with motherhood, you should love every minute. You don't have to love every minute of being in your 40s. Like, it is okay to be like, I'm frustrated that my clothes don't fit and my body is consistently changing. Again, you don't love it when certain things happen, when you're dragging your toddlers around in public, whatever. Like, when I look in the mirror, there are days where I'm like, I don't love what I see. That's normal and okay. But once you're in that headspace, you can either go far this way or far this way. And I think, allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. I don't think for a lot of people getting older is always easy, but there's a lot of beauty in it as well. And I think, this has been a fun age because I'm stronger than I've ever been. I'm in my basement working out harder than I worked out when I was in my 20s, but I'm also bigger than I was in my 20s, and I weigh more, and I'm wrinklier than I was in my 20s. But when I go down to the basement, I have different goals. I'm no longer trying to get smaller, no longer trying to look like I'm 25. I'm trying to think about my body 20, 30 years from now and what I can do to take care of future me. I think it's important when you start to have some of those, like, oh, I'm not loving this. Okay, normal. But what are some conversations we can have with ourselves that are positive? Things to look forward to, having that freedom. Feel like this is the decade where you're just going to kind of let some things go that maybe you were holding on to when you were younger. Um, and you have the group picture with all your girlfriends, and you're like, oh, I didn't like love that angle of how I looked in that picture. You know what? I had a ball that night, and we all had so much fun. So who cares? And that is something to look forward to. So, but yeah, I think just giving yourself space and permission to be like, this kind of sucks, but it's also not going to be too bad. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's pretty great, and you have that to look forward to.